Okay, so we're going deep today into something that's always fascinated me, and I think a lot of our listeners too.
Oh, yeah.
Cave paintings.
Absolutely.
You know, those incredible works of art from tens of thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
But we're not going to just be like, oh, pretty horses and bison, you know. We're
Correct.
going deeper than that.
Yeah.
What we're going to look at is the evidence suggesting that children, little kids, were not only present in these caves,
Wow.
but potentially actually involved in creating some of this art.
Fascinating.
And this is going back like 40,000 years.
Yeah. I mean, it really makes you wonder, what were these kids doing down in these deep, dark places?
It's a great question, right?
Yeah.
And to help us unpack this whole thing, we're going to be looking at some really interesting research from a team at Tel Aviv University.
Okay.
Dr. Ella Asaf, Dr. Yafet Kedar, and Professor Ran Barkai.
Great team.
They published this paper in the journal Arts, and they're putting forward this really compelling idea about why these young children might have been brought into these cave systems.
Okay.
So we're talking roughly, 40,000 to 12,000 years ago.
Right.
About 400 known decorated caves.
Yeah.
Mainly in France and Spain.
A lot of caves.
We know kids were there.
Yeah.
The evidence is there.
Footprints, handprints, all that.
So the real mystery is why.
Right. Exactly. Why were they there?
So one of the initial explanations, and, kind of the most obvious one, is that they were there to learn.
Yeah, the apprenticeship model, right?
Yeah, like bringing the young generation along to see how it's done.
Learn about the animals that were important to them.
Right, the techniques of making the art.
Passing down traditions.
Like a hands-on history lesson in a way.
Exactly.
But the Tel Aviv team,
Yeah.
they're proposing something a little bit different.
Okay.
A little bit more, how should I say, maybe spiritual.
Interesting.
They're arguing that these children actually held a very specific cultural significance and that they were thought to have a special connection to the spiritual world.
Like a link to the other side?
Yeah, and think about these caves, right?
Oh, yeah.
These deep, dark, mysterious, often kind of disorienting places.
Right.
Back then, they were probably seen as places where the veil between worlds was thin.
Yeah, like a portal.
Where it was easier to communicate with the spirits.
It's giving me chills just thinking about it.
And this actually connects really well with some of their earlier research, which was looking at the idea that the cave art itself wasn't just decorative.
Right.
It was about engaging with their cosmology.
Their understanding of the universe.
Exactly. Their relationship with these other entities.
So the kids weren't just there watching.
Yeah.
They were active participants.
Yeah. Maybe even essential to this whole communication process.
Wow. Mediators between the worlds.
Okay, so now we're getting into the pretty interesting territory. This idea that children have this special connection, this link to the spirit world. That's not really how we think about childhood today, at least not in most Western cultures.
No, not really.
So where is this idea coming from?
Well, the researchers, they looked at a lot of anthropological studies,
Okay.
both of present day and historical indigenous societies all around the world.
Interesting.
And they found that this perception of children as active agents in their communities.
Not just kids waiting to grow up.
Right. They're not just seen as future contributors. They're seen as having an important role right now,
Okay.
especially when it comes to the spiritual and social aspects of the group.
So it's not just about what they'll be one day. It's about what they are now.
Precise.
And what they bring to the table.
Exactly.
I like that.
And in a lot of these cultures, young children are seen as being closer to the spirit world.
Because they've just arrived from there.
Right. They're fresh from that realm.
So they have this heightened ability to connect with these other entities.
Spirits of nature, ancestors, even deities.
And for hunter-gatherer societies, these connections would have been crucial. Think about it.
Yeah.
Their whole life depended on the success of the hunt,
Right.
the bounty of the land.
So making sure they had good relationships with the spirits of those animals, the spirits of the plants.
It all makes sense when you look at it from that perspective.
It really does.
So let's bring it back to the caves now.
Okay.
Why were these places so significant?
Well, caves have held a special meaning for a lot of cultures throughout history.
Yeah, even today.
They're often seen as symbolic realms.
Like a gateway to another reality.
Exactly.
They're often associated with the underworld.
The realm of the dead and spirits.
These liminal spaces
Yeah.
existing between the known and the unknown.
Like a portal.
And we know that shamanic practices and rituals were often performed in caves,
Right.
trying to communicate with those cosmic entities and underworld inhabitants.
Seeking guidance, healing, ensuring good fortune.
So we have these sacred spaces, these caves,
Right.
and we have this need to connect with the spirit world. So where do the children fit in?
Well, this is where the idea of liminal beings comes into play.
Okay.
The researchers suggest that children themselves were considered liminal.
They're on that threshold.
Exactly.
They've just come from this spiritual realm before birth.
Right.
And they're still kind of integrating into the adult world.
Not fully anchored in this reality yet.
So because of that, they have easier access to those other realms.
It's like they have one foot in each world.
I see.
This makes them perfect intermediaries.
The bridge between the human and the non-human.
Exactly.
And maybe their perspective is seen as purer, more direct, untainted by all the complexities of adult life.
Like a clean slate.
So those little handprints and finger paintings,
Yeah.
maybe they're not just kids doodling around while the adults are doing the serious stuff.
Right.
Maybe they're actually a part of the ritual.
A way for the community to tap into that special connection that children have.
Wow. So instead of thinking of these kids as passive learners, they're actually active participants.
Key players in the spiritual life of the community.
It really challenges our assumptions, doesn't it?
It does.
About what childhood was like back then.
And what children were capable of.
We often think of them as dependent on adults just learning the ropes.
But this research suggests they had a much more significant role.
A role that was rooted in their community's spiritual beliefs.
Exactly.
So the main takeaway here is that these children weren't just present in these caves.
Right.
Their presence might have been essential to the whole purpose of the cave art and the rituals.
They weren't just observers, they were the link to the spirit world.
Yeah, and by looking at both the archaeological evidence, those handprints, footprints, and the insights from indigenous cultures,
We get a much richer understanding of what might have been going on.
it's like a whole new way of looking at the past.
One of those aha moments that makes you rethink everything.
It really makes you think about how we view childhood today and the capabilities we attribute to children.
Especially in the context of prehistory.
It's not just about preparing for adulthood. It's about recognizing and valuing the connection they already have.
To those aspects of the world that we might have lost touch with.
It's a powerful idea.
It is.
So I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
How does this ancient perspective on childhood compare with our modern views?
What does it say about our relationship with the unknown, with the spiritual dimensions of life? Imagine a society that valued children not just for what they might become,
But for what they already are.
their connection to those other realms.
It might just give us a new way of looking at ourselves and our place in the universe.
Food for thought.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring.